So welcome to the podcast of Female Talent and Women Who Make It Happen, number 7. Joined by Lynne from Boston Blockchain Associates. So today we're going to speak and do a couple of introductions about ourselves, your journey, your challenges, your drives, so you got to where you are today. Being honest, I have limited knowledge of the US regulatory bodies, so it'd be cool to understand a little bit around how they've adapted to the digital changes, where you've come from major corporations in-house, how you found the transition into consultancy from mindset and their application to it, and also kind of where you're going into a more of a digital era, what forced that and what drove you that way. So I'll do a kickstart. So my name's Anna, I'm from InterQuest. So they're a global search and consultancy business. So I head up their European footprint based here in Amsterdam. Now, this is focusing on risk, regulations, and compliance-related topics. Over to you.
Thank you. So my name is Lynne Marlor, and I am currently the chair of Boston Blockchain Association. I also have my own company called Transformational Strategies, and I am hosting an event in the United States, June 6th in Connecticut, called Women in Digital Assets, which I have a partner, and we are going to take this around the globe. And my mission now, while it is blockchain technology and digital assets, is really to empower women to embrace this technology because it will impact every piece of your life. My background is traditional finance. I was most recently the group head for asset managers, hedge fund, private equity, money transfer, and money service business for a bank in New York Mellon. In 2017, I went down the rabbit hole, as they say, for blockchain, and I never left and realized that that was sort of a path I wanted to explore. And I've been doing that now since about 2017.
And how would you say, so you got into that in 2017, how has the US market adapted to that?
Well, I would say that the European market, not only Eurozone, in particular, maybe the UK, Singapore, United Arab Emirates. I mean, there are some places around the globe that are far more advanced than the United States. In fact, we have a very difficult situation that we are in the midst of. We have at minimum 12 to 15 governing bodies, whether it's the Securities Exchange Commission, the CFTC, which is the Commodity Futures Trading, the federal tax, the Federal Reserve. I mean, the list goes on and on of regulatory bodies who are trying to either find a way to get tax income or find a way to prevent this from happening. And there is a sort of a disconnect even with the very large financial institutions, and they have an arm that is focused on digital assets. And then, the best example I have is Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan. On one hand, he says, Bitcoin and crypto are dead and I don't like them. And on the other hand, he's building a digital identity and a verification protocol that kind of counteracts that. So same thing, BlackRock, same thing. I mean, some of these huge financial institutions are really embracing the technology. They're not talking about it. We are in the midst of a internal, really, fight of who's going to own it, who's going to regulate it, who's going to create guardrails. And we, as a result, have done nothing. So the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, has come in and said, if they don't like what you're doing, they don't like staking, stop, you can't do that. They're slapping hands, they're saying you've got to stop this. But then they don't, what we need is guardrails. Okay, you can't go over here or over here, but this looks like it's okay. Anyway, so it's a quagmire.
I feel like that's where it is in most places, but as I say, the US isn't something I've been integrated in too often. It's mainly the European and the UK market, which you do have the left or the right, but what's in between? But so many people are afraid to kind of explore that because it opens so many questions in grey areas. I think the regulator in their mind just wants to keep it very straight and narrow so they don't have to start going down all of these rabbit holes. From when you were in, in the traditional banking space and very high up in Bank of New York Mellon, how did you find yourself moving into the blockchain area? Because obviously they wasn't utilizing it mainly.
Right.
How did you get into it?
So it happened really in a couple different ways. One was I was invited to attend, this is going back to 2017, Bank of New York Mellon invited Ripple, which is in a lawsuit
yeah.
today, in to explore, it was really an exploratory meeting to explore what a BK coin might look like. So, in the early 1800s, banks had coins. And so, I'd carry around a big coin that might be $100 or something. And that was from, Bank of New York Mellon, right? So they were exploring this idea of what would it be? Could we use it as an incentive, a loyalty? They were kind of exploring what they would do with it and trying to understand the technology. My boss asked me to go to a meeting. I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. And at that point I said, it sounds really interesting. I then took a course and, kind of the rest is history. And then I just decided that it was really something I wanted to really get involved in, right? So
your boss kicks himself for sending you to that meeting then?
Probably, yeah.
Looking back in hindsight, it's a fine thing. Yeah. But throughout your time at Bank of New York Mellon as well, you were there for a really long time and also back in the kind of traditional banking side. Yeah. How did you find it in that space and kind of how did you move into that space as well? If we take away from where you are now and go back,
well,
what was the journey?
And I'm going to talk a little bit about where I am today. I think my sort of mission at this point in my life, I had a fabulous career. I loved every moment, but the fact of the matter is, when I started my career in institutional banking, right, there were not many women there. And if there were, we were almost pitted against each other. It was extremely competitive and in some cases, not in a nice way. Now, in order to survive that, I became like everybody's, next door neighbor, right? All the guys, right? And you've got to roll with the punches or whatever. But as my career progressed, I felt like my job at this point, and much more so even now, is I'm not going to knock on your door and tell you that you need to understand some of the technology around blockchain, because your digital identity, you are going to have a digital identity, whether you like it or not. You're going to have digital assets that you have to manage, whether you like it or not. So my thing is, I'm not going to knock on your door and pull you out and say, you need to learn this. But if you come to me and knock on my door and say, I'm curious, I'm going to put my hand out and bring you in. Because I think one of the things that men do a very good job of, not only networking, but, sort of empowering and enabling, and I mean it in a positive way. So, if I had many men come to me and say, oh, I got this young kid who's great. I know I play golf with his father, or I'm in this Rotary Club, or didn't mean much, right? But it's an entry into it's the door opener. We need to open the doors for women in these institutions to make sure that they get their spot, right? And I think digital assets to me has been interesting, because I think women are actually getting some C-suite jobs in big institutions in digital assets. So let's open the flood doors. Let's help these women. Whatever, if I can mentor or help in any way, that's really my mission now, right? I really want to do that. I think I didn't have that, and I want to get that back, right?
So if you was to look back at it, obviously you say you didn't have that. What could have been done more of to help people in institutions and the digital asset space get to senior positions smoothly? Well,
this is going to sound maybe ironic coming from, because I think Europe and UK and Amsterdam, those countries are way ahead of us. So there's a couple of simple things that you think about. Number one, in Europe, you get a year off when you have a baby. 1 year, right?
Well, actually, Amsterdam, you have, I think it's about 4 months. It's not as much as it is in the UK. I know that.
Okay. Yeah, well, I had 6 weeks.
Wow. Wow.
So, just saying, so that's sort of one thing, is recognize that, look, this is, your body is kind of this vessel that, and it goes through a lot of stuff. And so, giving time to those who want it, or the option if I could take 6 months, maybe a little less pay, or I can go back in 6 weeks. I mean, I didn't have any option. There were no options. So those are coming. The paternity is coming, right? That, the husbands can get that as well. But the other thing is, the biggest issue I saw in my career, and it's also coming up today with COVID, is childcare. Unless you have family, I've heard stories, people are paying. With COVID, all the childcare things sort of fell apart, and now they're charging outrageous fortunes to take care of children. And so I was fortunate, I had family close by. I had backups, and, I had all that. So, there are institutions out there, and I can think of one that was a client of mine, the TJ Maxx, or TK Maxx, it's called in Eurozone, right? The CEO is a woman. The treasurer, the CFO, they're all women. And early on, they had a daycare in the office. So you could go to work in the morning, take your kid, and have coffee or have lunch with your child. I mean, so
that feels like it's centuries away, even over here. And my sister may kick me for this, but she has a little girl, my niece, and even back home, she's always been quite a career-driven woman. And then she has a baby. And then it's okay, what can I do? Because there's all of this childcare, and it is extortionate what they charge. Yeah. And then you outweigh, okay, if I go to work and have this much and pay this much, what's the point? You may as well just have time off work and spend time, with your child. And ultimately, as times move on, and as you have more kind of CEO female bosses, you're going to start having that thought of a hell of a lot more. Because it's always had the mindset before of, the woman stays off and the man stays at work, and that's just how it works. But now even that's changing with the paternity side of it. Right. The man has the chance to be off while the woman can continue to work. And I suppose for me, it's how to balance out a career versus maintaining your own personal life.
I think it's quite challenging. And it's interesting, probably 15 years ago, I had a woman who worked for me, and she had her third child, and she came to me, again, this was a long time ago, but she came to me and said, I can't do this anymore. Like, I cannot, my husband works nights, they owned a restaurant, and I cannot do, come to the office and everything. And I said, what do you need? She said, I need 1 day a week off. And I would be fired for this today, but I negotiated with her, okay, pick the day. She went to Wednesdays off. I said, you shut off your computer, everything is off, but we're not going to tell anybody. Because I knew this woman, she had worked for me for 6 years, and she was at 5 a.m. she'd be sending me emails, midnight and I thought, you know what, she's going to still work 5 days, even with 4 days. So I said, and I told her, I said, if you work 4 days, you're going to get 4/5 vacation, 4/5 of bonuses, 4/5 of benefits, everything. And I know you. So I said, let's try it. And if there's an emergency, like if I need you one of those days, I might need you, and you got to just, I'm not going to abuse it, but you got to be mindful. Anyway, every week, every day, every morning, 5 a.m., I'd have like 5 or 10 emails from her. And I thought, I had people on my team who, I couldn't find them. So, my feeling is I would be fired for that today, because you couldn't, I hid that from the administration, right? But the fact of the matter is, a boss, whether that's the CEO or group manager or whatever, should have some flexibility. This woman was so valuable that I couldn't lose her. I knew I would do anything to keep her. And, she ended up leaving because she and her husband moved. And, but, I think we have to realize, whether it's childcare or, your parent care. I have friends who are now dealing with their parents, right? It's extremely challenging. So I think it's the idea of flexibility. My kids were into theater and arts, and I liked taking the afternoon. They had a play at 3:00. That's what I did. I went out at 3:00. I don't care if I work till midnight, but I want to see that play, right? So, we have to, not through a surveillance society. Maybe that's what it takes for some companies. There has to be a balance. And as a manager, you also have to know who can I give this to and who can't. Who will abuse
there's
it,
some
you know?
people who will just, you give them an inch and they run a mile, I think is the expression of it. And that's too true, because if you have someone who's there at 5 a.m. and there till midnight, you know for a fact they're going to work that day, even if you tell them not to. Whereas you know for a fact, if there's someone that, you know, starts at 9 and comes in at 9:01 and finishes at 5 and leaves at 4:59, then they're not going to work that day and you're not going to get much out of them. So I think it's a bit of a push and a pull factor, but also the flexibility since COVID has kind of been kicked into businesses that predominantly had a no work from home policy, because A, there was no trust, B, they didn't think they could do their work from home, and C, they thought they would just lay in bed and do nothing. Whereas everyone had to work from home and companies didn't have a choice, you saw a lot of people go into a full-on meltdown mode about the 4 of their team working from home. But ultimately the results shone through, and I think some companies, even your bigger players like Bank of New York Mellon and Goldman Sachs, saw some of their best years, and the digital asset rose that year as well.
But it is interesting. I got a call from a friend of mine that her company had a policy, I think it was 2 days a week. They just announced probably a week or so ago that, and they don't have any monitoring tools on the PC or anything like that, but they announced that their production was down, and they believed it was because people were working from home and they want everyone back every day in the office. And it's a big strain now for people who've, you know, commuting expense, you know, just all of that stuff. So
some people moved further outside because they could remote work. So they went to cheaper locations as well.
Yep. Or something that was more conducive to the family life. I have a friend from Massachusetts, 3 kids. He said his kids were bonkers when they had to, you know, everybody's at home, they couldn't study, and then they had a vacation home in Vermont in the mountains. And he said the minute they moved there, the kids could ski like in the afternoon, or, you know, he said our family worked. And so they actually relocated there, and he's working remote now. Now, I don't know what'll happen if they call him back, but
you'll probably be down the same roads as that. So obviously you went through quite a big change from an in-house corporation, but also a massive change of mindset. From the mindset you had in an institution such like that to a mindset you have to have in more of a digital space, what was the biggest challenge?
You know, I think I'm not sure if there were, I had always worked from home like a couple of days, so that wasn't a big deal, but
mainly just in terms of the work itself. So
so I guess
how they would structure it here to here is two completely different.
So it's somewhat unstructured, right? You know, when you have a traditional financial structure, right, there's a policy for everything, you know, like, you know, whether it's so we had whether you're moving money, whether you're investing that money, whether you're signing a loan document, you know, everything is written out in legalese and has to be followed step by step by step. In digital assets, we're building these steps. We don't have the steps. So you look at compliance, you know, and people barely, KYC, that's know your customer. What does that really mean? I mean, people ask me all the time, what does that mean? Well, you know, where's the source of your funds? You know, all the, you know, where's your office? You know, if you have a website, you know, all of that checking out. I mean, who are the founders of the company? Where did your money come from? You know, all of those things, plus, you know, this AML process of anti-money laundering. So, you know, how do you monitor in a open source way funds moving on a blockchain that may be going to a sanctioned country? Right? So, you know, I had guardrails that were, you know, I'd get a call if you know, somebody's doing it. That doesn't happen here, and we're building that. So the challenge is also, I think, part of the excitement is that it's all new. And, you know, we're building, and I think what we want to think about is, as we build this regulatory environment to embrace this technology, how do we take the best of the old but not the worst of the old, you know,
Yeah.
and make that, like, for me, I really think a digital identity. Now, whether that's you as an individual or you as a corporation, that have some kind of digital identity. So an example in the hedge fund business, if there are 4 people who are the founders of this hedge fund and they made billions from whatever they made their money on, they want to open up, they see today, hey, let's open up a gold fund, or tomorrow, let's open up a lithium battery fund, right? I need all new documentation. I need, like, I don't even know you. So those are bad rules, you know, in my opinion. Look, these are the 4 guys, they are women, right? They've already done this. They want to open a new fund as long as we manage it. It's taking the best and applying it in a way that makes sense. So I think that's, and not that it's simple, it's not, it's complex, but those are the things I think that are challenging, and they are very challenging. They are not easy problems to solve, but that's also part of the excitement of it. So
you get to learn something new as well, because if you are in an institution where it is like this, it is set. Everyone knows it, you understand it, and you know what way you can go. When you strip all of that away, all of the kind of delegative authority you would have to the resources in the team, stripped away, and it's you ultimately. You can build it, you can design it, you can implement it. It is on you, and you can use the knowledge that you have. But that's not going to be enough, if we're honest, because if you look at the technology world and all you can do from a blockchain area, you're going to be finding out more and more things each and every day. You can apply some theoretical thinking, but quite a lot of it is just application and experimental.
It's so true. I always say that, you know, unless you've actually been through sort of an experience of a use case, like in the midst of a project, it's very hard to get your arms around what I consider the tentacles of it, because it is, you've got this philosophical issue, you know, that sort of overrides, like Bitcoin, of, you know, libertarian, you know, money and freedom and access for everybody. You look at, you know, the underbanked and the unbanked. So, you know, all of these things, there's so many tentacles to this thing. And then you've got the governance side of it. You've got the risk management side of it. You've got the, you know, there's just, and then, you know, what products do you offer and how do you offer them? And is it on a phone, or is it on, you know, where there's just so
anywhere these days.
Well, and then it's decentralized. So I worked on an NFT project, and, you know, so I came from a large organization. I don't need to find the DevOps people, right? You know, I call my DevOps department, hey guys, I got a night, can you come down? You know, here you have to find what layer, what protocol are we gonna, so first we got to find a blockchain they're going to work on, and then we got to find out, you know, okay, who works in that blockchain, who can build something in the, you know, I mean, there's just so many tentacles and to it that that is also, I think, challenging. If you're not used to that, if you're used to a startup, it's easy. But in my background, everybody was in one build, right? We're all centralized. You work for the bank, and I call your number, and so
you get on with the work. Because when it's like it comes to you and you're trying to piece it together, like you say in a startup, you're used to, you get this, I need to do something with it now. Here's 10 other objectives I need to overcome to get to the one thing I could have pulled. How you then start saying, okay, so what is this? Who do we need for it? How does it need to look? What do we need to piece together? What do we need to take into consideration? How does it fit in terms of risk appetite? Is it going to be compliant? And this is where you need to start thinking on a much broader spectrum of, okay, how are we going to facilitate all this? Where do we start, and who's best to do it?
Right. No, you nailed it. I think it's, for me, that's part of the excitement, is that, as you mentioned, you know, like every day I learn something. I mean, every day, maybe more than one thing, right?
but
every day, like, something I hadn't thought, like, you know, somebody brings up, oh, you know, I never thought of that. Someone just told me yesterday something about a smart contract. I said, I never knew that, you know. So I think that's really the fun part too, is it's not like, one of us is the expert, right? We might, like, my husband says to me, well, you're an expert in this. And I'm like, well, not really. I mean, every time I go down deeper, I think I know less, right? But everybody feels that way, right?
Yeah.
You know what you know, somebody else knows what they know, and we're kind of piecing this together. And it's very exciting because I think everybody learns something from each other. It's very collaborative, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, I think if you look more into that sort of area anyway, it is a more collaborative approach because everyone knows a little bit of something. If you put that all together, you all know everything, and then you still have more to learn. Whereas what you referenced earlier of girls get pit against each other back when you started your career and it's survival of the swiftest, would you have shared knowledge with anyone back then, or would anyone have shared knowledge with you or others in the company, or would they have kept it to themselves hoping it would get them somewhere further than they would get?
Yeah, I think that was the challenge. Now, I was very fortunate. I went to a training program, and interestingly enough, there were I think there were 25 women and 25 men in this class that we had, and there were probably only 2 women left in the financial world, me and a friend of mine. Most of them at some point phased out. Either they went into, real estate, or their husband, they had kids and they just couldn't pull it, or whatever. But I think the thing that was so interesting is that at the end of this year-long training program, you had to do a project. And I picked, there were 4 people on your team, and you really didn't get to choose your team. Yeah. My team had 3 women and 1 guy, which was kind of an odd number, but it was myself and the guy, and we did all the work. And thank God these people aren't still in the industry, but they did nothing. They did nothing. They were like, well, I don't really care if I'm not sure I'm really gonna have a job, or, they didn't really take it seriously. And so they never, so that was almost like I, partnered with this guy who was super, he's from London School of Economics, and we just nailed the presentation. We probably got the highest score. We nailed it and worked very hard on it. So I either found that women already were like, well, I don't want to work that hard. Or once you got out, they were like, well, I'm not going to share. I worked hard to get where, I'm not going to share this information with anybody. So there were kind of, there were mixed messages. And I have friends who say, well, I didn't find that. There are times that you don't find that, but you really have to have a personality that you can actually maneuver around
those types of people.
Yeah.
To be able to show the talent that you have. But I think it's even more accepting these days of the trying to have that more collaborative approach to people. So I suppose moving into the digital side, what would you say drives you most to stay there?
Right now, I'm working on this Women in Digital Assets event, and I really want to take it around the globe. And I, not to be totally altruistic, but, I really do feel passionate about just understand, the reason I think I've stayed in this digital asset ecosystem is that I know it's going to happen. And I want to understand what it means to me. So what does it mean to have a digital identity? So if I want to, I have a digital identity, and you work at some firm, and what do you actually see of mine?
Yeah.
What do you see my, in the United States, Social Security number? Do you see my passport number? Do you know where I live? Do you know the income that I have? Do you know how many bank accounts I have? Do you know how many cars what do you get to see? And how does that information get parsed and protected? Having worked for a very large institution where risk mitigation is like the key word, right?
Yeah.
Do I trust your security? Everything is hackable today. The banks are literally one step ahead, right? So that's where I come in, like, okay, I'm going to have my digital identity for whatever this is, and what kind of security do they have? And can Anna, if she doesn't like the way I treated her, let all her friends see all my information. I mean, what happens?
How do you maintain it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, part of the other piece of that is not only, who gets to see it, but what do you get to see, and how do you get to see it? I mean, what we didn't understand with Facebook is what I'm trying to understand here. So in Facebook, if I said, oh, I love your shirt or your jewelry, on my phone, I got 500 ads for that jewelry you had.
Yeah, and your shoes.
I didn't know just because I friended you on Facebook, and maybe I said I like your jewelry or something, that I would get these. That's what I want to understand. How does an action that I take, allowing you to have my digital identity for whatever, that action,
relay it back. What
does that mean? Does that mean now I'm going to get 15 ads for your company? Or I want to understand that. So for me, I think I want to understand it, and I want not only women, but I want everyone to say, you know what, I'm curious too, like, what does that mean to me going forward?
Yeah. How does it actually apply? And I suppose, like you referenced as well, and when you think about it, there's so many, it's like the octopus analogy. There's so many different routes that you can go down, because all of them leads to more questions.
Yeah.
So it's like a never-ending octopus, we'll stay with, of continuous questions, but also continuous deep diving, because although you think you get to the bottom, there's something which technology will throw in to alter the path that you've been going down. And that's the evolution of it. And you're starting to see more and more people go into that digital space because of a common interest, but B, a bit of innovation behind them and a little bit of risk taking. So people who are highly risk averse are seemingly staying in the banks and really enjoying the what they call safety. But I don't really see it as a safety anymore. I see that as more of a non-safe route, because everything is going digitalized and things will evolutionize. And banks will become a thing of the past, and there'll be a time where you have no banks you can walk into. The same as I think will happen with shops, because I think it's all going to go online and digital.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, even looking at, one thing like your health records, So, my daughter has a chronic illness, right? And if you, on paper, you were going to hire somebody now. Granted, I don't know how easy it would be to have access to her health records, but let's say you knew someone at the healthcare provider, right? Who knows? But the fact of the matter is, there is privacy around some of those things. But do I know that if you work at a hospital where my daughter has, spent days, you can't access those records, and you're going to hire. On paper, these two people look exactly the same, except my daughter has this chronic illness, which means she might be late for work because mornings are tough for her, okay? I mean, who are you going to hire?
Yeah, that's where it just comes down to, is how their mindset is. Because although, like your daughter, if she is slightly late because she does have that chronic illness, but the application she has is and the knowledge she has is far greater, which comes back to the point of flexibility and how you can be flexible against needs and avenues, because not everyone's going to be 100% of the time. So how can we work with that, and how can we work with people who have the knowledge and skill set there, but feel like they're the second choice just because of an implication?
Yeah, and I think that, the certainly, and I can only speak sort of for the United States, but I have a friend whose son has paralyzed from, like, his left arm is paralyzed, and in any event, he got a great job, and they know he has this disability. So for him, I mean, he can only type with one hand, or on the keyboard. It takes him longer to get dressed, all those things that you and I take for granted.
Yeah.
And this is a really big company and a really great company. I mean, I'd love to work for them, right? He got a great job, and they know of his disability, and they accommodated him with a variety of things, So, I mean, it's happening. and I think the world is getting to be a nicer place in some of the, in those ways. So we'll see. But I think we still have to understand, how does even my digital, do I warehouse this? And if you want to hire me, if you say, well, Lynn, you're my, then I share with you, I have a chronic illness or whatever, my daughter, if she gets the job, she shares with you what she has, right? But, how do we know that anything hasn't happened beforehand, right? So I just think that I want to own some of my stuff, right? And I want to know who has it and why you have it. If I'm registering a car in the state, I understand that you need to know that I live in that state, but do you need my bank account and do you need all that stuff? I don't think so. So,
no.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And to be honest with you, sometimes you do wait until the end, but then why should you? You should have good as chances as the rest, no matter what it is. I feel like I could talk to you all day, pretty much, on digital assets and what you see the future at. It's fascinating. And the event you have coming up speaks volumes. But to kind of round this up a little bit, if you was to kind of put one last word of encouragement or something which has really resonated with you throughout your career, which really drove you to where you are today, what would that be?
Be curious. Curiosity. Right? There's a lot of things that I could say, but I think unless you're curious, you don't even go down that path, right?
No.
So it doesn't have to be in the sense of digital assets. I think for anybody, if you're curious, how does a elite athlete get there? If you're curious, how does a writer get there? Be curious, right? Don't just sit back and say, hey, I always thought I wanted to be a writer, but,
it never happened for me.
Yeah, and not good enough. Be curious, try to find out, how did they get there? What did they do? I think that's, I was curious, and also I felt, when I get sort of in a situation, I'm like, I don't even know what they're talking about. I was like, oh my God, I need to get a little more educated, right? So I was curious, but I also wanted to be a little more educated and try to understand it. And I think, so curiosity really started my journey. And I think that's a key for everything, because I think that, like a lot of friends of mine are saying, why do you even go down this path? Yeah. Well, I was curious, plus, I find it fascinating, and it's true of anything, just embrace it and dig deep, I guess.
Yeah. No, I really like that point.
What's her name? Lean in is,
lean in. But no, I really, really like that point, because I think there's so many people you speak to who say, oh, I really wanted to be X, Y, and Z, but it just never happened, just never fell into it. And you just think you don't fall into it. You are interested and brought in enough to be curious around the hows and whys it happens, and then you look to explore it a little bit yourself, and then you get into that space because of curiosity, but also some drive behind it. And like you said as well, kind of getting some education along the way just to back up what you're learning, but you're never going to do that unless you put your best foot forward, as they say. Well, look. Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's it. And, being the curiosity comes with being vulnerable a little bit, like, okay, I don't know anything, right? I was curious, but I was like vulnerable, like, oh my God, if this thing happens and I don't know anything, I'm out of here, right? They're going to get rid of me. So I think there's a part of saying, I want to be curious, and I'm willing to be a little vulnerable and say, I don't get it. And I will say the entire sort of blockchain ecosystem, digital, it is complex. And so it isn't, I go to one meeting and I got this. You got the conception, right? But you and I talked about this, like there's so many layers, whether it's risk or compliance or, it's like, I got this, and then, oh, geez, I didn't think of that, So to me, it is absolutely fascinating. I'm fascinated by it, and I don't even feel like I work. I feel like this is just my own curiosity. Yeah. So that's the best you could ask for, right?
It is the best use to ask for, and vulnerability and curiosity add loads of value. Whether it's now, whether it's down the line, if you find something you're interested in. And I would ask you what you could do more of to kind of influence females into this. But clearly from everything that you're adding into it, being an ambassador, having that women association, there's lots to be said, and it's a really inviting place. Anywhere from someone who's never touched the digital asset or said digital asset before, to people who have been in the industry for many, many years and just interested in getting to know more of the network and newer network.
And it's allowed me, I think the other thing that's I've really enjoyed is it has allowed me, so I worked on an NFT, a non-fungible token project last year. And, I said right off the bat, I am like, I'm a financial person, like this is a little out of my wheelhouse, but I met some, and in many of these, a lot of the people I met were in their 20s, some even probably 19, right? Artists, techies who were building marketing and artistry around NFTs. And, here again, a lot of people get to a certain point, and I've worked with many of those people. Well, I know it all, right? You mentioned this.
You can't tell me anything.
I said, just like Chat GPT, somebody, happened, this young kid, I said, I really want, he's like, well, let's do it right now. He went through the whole thing at Chat GPT, set me up. I'm like, same thing happened with NFT. It allows you the opportunity to converse with all ages. I mean, the project I worked on, we had someone from London, we had an artist from Lebanon, we had another guy from Paris, we had, a guy from Miami who was a marketing guy, and a guy from Indiana marketing guy. I mean, and some of them were literally like, I don't know, 20, and they taught me.
I just gone out the window now for how long you've been in the industry and comparable to where you are, because everyone brings a different knowledge that you can look to gain, and you can share your knowledge and we'll have no idea, and then we'll know something that we can share with you, and vice versa. And even graduates coming in fresh from uni have a lot to share and a lot to give, that we're all more acceptable to learning from. Egos, I think, seem to have gone out the window.
Right. So that's another, I think, a super benefit about it is, everybody gets to be their expert in a sense, right? If you've done the homework, a lot of these young kids who played in the NFT space, especially around sports teams and stuff. Yeah. I mean, I've learned so much from them about, the positioning of a product and the marketing of a product, and what gets like hits, and how do the clicks, and how does all this, it was, I've never, that's not something I ever experienced before, right? Banking doesn't really, how many clicks are we getting on, it was absolutely fascinating. So it's a great opportunity to learn, so it's fun. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. I was going to say, as I said before, I'll sit here and chat to you all leaving, but I'll round this up. Well, look, thank you so much. It's been really interesting to understand your story of how you got into where you are, what drives you the most, what you're doing yourself to influence female talent into this industry, and what we can do to support. And it was interesting to hear about your story. And thank you for joining the podcast.
Thank you so much. And I will tell you that Women in Digital Assets, it's coming to the UK. I can't, we'll see once we have to be successful with a couple of these, but we're definitely coming to the UK probably in October, and I'll send you a free invite. How's that?
Oh, I'll take it.
All right.
I'm never going to say no.